Tonight on 24, we cover Trump's fresh warnings to escalate operations against Iran. The US president says the United States maintains full control of the vital Strait of Hormuz, and he's officially issued direct orders to fire on hostile mine-laying boats. Iran International's exclusive report reveals the behind-the-scenes cancellation of the Iranian delegation's planned trip to Islamabad, triggered by a significant dispute between the government and Mujtaba Khamenei's office. Meanwhile, Pakistani officials stated that diplomatic talks between Tehran and Washington have practically stalled.
As long as this regime is in place, you will continue to face these threats.
And Prince Reza Pahlavi's speech to a number of German representatives. He said if the Islamic Republic remains, more wars will occur.
Broadcasting live from Iran International's news studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Viewers of Iran International in Iran and around the world, hello and good evening. The US president says the Islamic Republic is politically confused and facing internal disputes. Donald Trump on Truth Social called Iran's current situation chaotic and crazy. The heads of the three branches of power in Iran, in a simultaneous reaction, also said there are no hardliners or moderates in Iran, and everyone is Iranian and revolutionary. Donald Trump also said the United States has full control of the Strait of Hormuz and is clearing mines there. Trump has also ordered all IRGC vessels to be targeted because, according to him, they might be laying mines. But with the continued naval blockade of Iran, the US Department of War has reported the seizure of another oil tanker linked to the Islamic Republic's shadow fleet in the Indian Ocean. According to US officials, this tanker contained Iranian oil and was stopped and inspected outside territorial waters. My colleague Ardavan Ruzbeh has joined us from outside the White House in Washington. Ardavan, while there were hopeful whispers circulating about the possibility of diplomatic talks resuming tomorrow, the situation has shifted. We are now seeing the tensions between Iran and the US are sharply rising once again in the international waters of the Indian Ocean, near the Iranian coast.
Well, the second Islamic Republic ship was recently attacked in the strategic Indian Ocean waters. In fact, the vessel Majlisi X is now the second ship that the United States Navy fleet is actively seizing and targeting in this region. On the one hand, CENTCOM was officially saying yesterday that at least 29 Islamic Republic ships, by direct order of the US military fleet, were forced to return to their own ports and were not allowed to pass through the international waterways. This tense maritime standoff is happening exactly at a time when the Islamic Republic also doesn't seem to be sitting idle, preparing potential countermeasures. The recent targeting of several commercial vessels today, on Thursday, by the Islamic Republic, alongside an aggressive attempt to seize two separate ships, is a clear indication that the Islamic Republic is actively trying to engage in confrontation. Furthermore, Mohseni Ejei strongly emphasized today that the Islamic Republic will persistently continue its maritime operations in the sea. Specifically, they will maintain a presence in the strategic Strait of Hormuz and remain fully ready for operations. On the other hand, Mr. Trump is officially ordering this blockade project to go one step further. The blockade project, which in essence, in a way one could say was a delicate neither war nor peace situation, was ultimately aimed at creating pressure against the Islamic Republic. Now, another dangerous step is getting much closer to an actual war. This is happening because Mr. Trump, right at a critical time, he ordered the explosive mines in the Strait of Hormuz region to be cleared, issued a strict warning. He explicitly emphasized that any boat or ship of the Islamic Republic and the IRGC that lays mines must be entirely destroyed. In a way, one could easily say that this aggressive posture itself is getting dangerously closer to a major regional crisis. On the one hand, it is critically important for the Islamic Republic that this crippling blockade is lifted. This is because the Islamic Republic's oil, 100% of which used to be exported to China at 1,600,000 barrels a day, practically no longer exists. On the other hand, it is said the complete lifting of this economic siege as a strict condition for participating in any diplomatic negotiations. However, the Americans maintain that this siege will not be lifted, arguing that the Islamic Republic has repeatedly proven it is simply not trustworthy. It is precisely in such volatile circumstances, that it seems highly likely in the coming days, if an agreement isn't reached, that the United States' primary effort will be to significantly increase this strategic pressure, meaning they will inevitably take a further, more aggressive step. It is really enough that if a military or commercial ship from the Islamic Republic enters the highly contested Persian Gulf region, so situated near the Strait of Hormuz, and ground operations or a direct naval conflict actually begins, then you can absolutely no longer say it's merely a situation of applying pressure for peace. It seems painfully clear that such a rapidly deteriorating situation could once again ignite a fire of war throughout the region. A fire of war that, with the April 12 plan and the closure of Iranian ports, made the Strait of Hormuz issue prominent, bringing oil below $93, and now it's above $100. And this is a big concern for many European countries, that if this conflict starts again, this crisis might, affect many countries worldwide.
Thank you, Ardavan Rizve, for your latest update from in front of the White House in Washington, D.C. Mar Dubowitz, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, has joined us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Dubowitz, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to speak with us. There were previously encouraging signs that perhaps by Friday or within the next few days, Iran and the United States would formally negotiate again in Islamabad. But escalating verbal hostilities and rising military tensions at sea seem to have greatly weakened the possibility of this diplomatic negotiation. Given these developments, do you think we are heading towards another full-scale war once again?
Well, I think there's a possibility.
I genuinely think it's entirely possible. It's completely clear that the leadership of the Islamic Republic is currently paralyzed and can't make a definitive decision about whether they want to genuinely negotiate a new agreement or return to a state of open war. Because of this internal hesitation, they simply can't present a coherent offer or, a viable diplomatic proposal to the US. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump has also very clearly stated that his current ceasefire is relatively short and conditional. He fully retains the option to either return to a large-scale military operation or to continue to severely pressure the regime in Iran through critical economic sanctions. Ultimately, he firmly thinks that time is on his side, and time is definitely not on their side.
How much do you think this critical issue of the Strait of Hormuz has truly become the Achilles heel of the ongoing negotiations? Because currently, it seems quite apparent that neither the American side nor the Iranian side is willing to be the first to step back and stop this blockade.
Well,
I truly believe that this specific issue serves as a critical economic Achilles heel for the regime in Iraq. To understand the sheer magnitude of the situation, consider that the regime has already incurred an absolutely staggering $300 billion in cumulative financial losses, a figure actually acknowledged by Iranian President Pezeshkian. And right now, you are looking at devastating economic losses, amounting to roughly $430 million each and every single day. Due to strict enforcement, they fundamentally lack the ability to successfully export and sell their crude oil to major buyers like China. Furthermore, they simply cannot import the crucial essential items that the regime desperately needs to properly manage Iran's struggling economy. Ultimately, I think again, time is firmly on President Trump's side, and on the side of leaders, or, the prominent leaders who actually run the whole country and manage its affairs.
But it certainly seems that Tehran's hand isn't entirely empty in this geopolitical standoff. It is increasingly clear that within this ongoing economic war they have initiated, specifically by threatening to close the vital Strait of Hormuz, they understand their leverage. Western powers and their Persian Gulf allies have significantly more to lose, at least economically, than the heavily sanctioned Islamic Republic.
Well, I think that
I personally think this was exactly what the regime assumed from the start, and that specific threat was the main card they always played with. They consistently played this geopolitical game, leveraging this card, and repeatedly closed a crucial strike. Well, unfortunately for them, they actually did this, and because of that severe miscalculation, they are now significantly weaker, while the United States is considerably stronger. If they, if we were to fully consider this broader dynamic, they strategically wanted to bide their time and wait until the political climate in the United States shifted, hoping to hold out until President Trump was no longer in office. Under a new administration, they believed they could rapidly amass an arsenal of 10,000 advanced missiles, deadly drones, and even nuclear bombs. Furthermore, they anticipated that powerful allies like China and Russia would readily come to their aid, essentially building a formidable army for them, while securing the crucial lifting of crippling sanctions. Once fully empowered, they could have easily closed the strategic strait at will. By constantly threatening this maritime choke point, they possessed the potential to completely paralyze the global economy, knowing no one else could effectively intervene. But unfortunately for the regime, they hastily played this geopolitical card they had in hand when they were still fundamentally weak, and the Navy, the United States and the military have a strategic plan, and they've maintained the specific plan for, 5 decades, well, exactly 50 years, to keep the crucial Strait of Hormuz open to navigation. Today, they are heavily carrying out different phases of this ongoing plan, including neutralizing any immediate regional security threats. In response to the regime's growing offensive capabilities, the United States Navy has increased its navigational presence in the contested Strait of Hormuz to escort vulnerable commercial oil tankers. Because the hostile regime has repeatedly attacked neighboring Gulf countries, these nations acutely understand that they urgently need to find a strategic way to bypass the dangerous geographic bottleneck of the Strait of Hormuz. Consequently, they are actively planning to lay an extensive overland pipeline network. Through this ambitious infrastructure project, crucial Saudi Arabian oil along with oil from the United Arab Emirates would safely pass directly through through the eastern port of Fujian. We are clearly seeing these vital alternative export routes being developed and created. By ensuring these massive pipelines are laid, the Gulf states are guaranteeing that the aggressive regime cannot, in fact, choke off their energy exports and cripple their economy in the future. And this was essentially their last, the very last card they had left to play after their missile and nuclear program became extremely weak and was effectively destroyed. And, well, now they are putting this country, Iran, right back into incredibly difficult economic conditions.
Mart, former President Donald Trump recently shared a highly provocative post on his social media platform. The message suggests potential assassinating entrenched hardliners in Iran to pave the way for renewed negotiations with moderate factions. Do you genuinely view such a dramatic scenario as probable? Is it truly realistic that Trump might inadvertently empower figures like Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf by strategically eliminating his extreme rivals in Tehran?
Well, it seems like President Trump.
Well, Mr. Trump has exquisitely warned prominent people like Vahidi and, various other political adversaries that they are next on the target list, and everyone is waiting to see.
اونها کاملا در جریان هستند که خیلی از همکاران اونها از بین رفتن.
Ali Khamenei was also killed in the first attack on February 28th. 40 senior commanders and political leaders were all killed in 40 seconds. And, well,
اسرائیلی و آمریکا میدونن که همه کجا هستن. همه این فرمانده ها رو میدونن و
and like the powerful military bodies of both Iran and the United States, possess the capability to systematically eliminate anyone who actively stands in the way of these crucial diplomatic efforts. In that specific sense, this dynamic can actually serve as a substantial kind of help to key figures like Ghalibaf and Arachi, and all those others honestly looking for an agreement.
ولی سپاه و مجتبی خامنه‌ای جلوش رو گرفتن و اینها آدم‌های سختی هستن که تصمیمات بدی رو گرفتن.
And they, essentially dragged the entire country into profound darkness and recklessly brought two devastating wars upon themselves. Furthermore, many widespread protests have started, mirroring movements that go all the way back to the 90s, and they made a severe miscalculation by foolishly thinking that Mr. Trump
کوتاه میاد یا یه توافق بدی انجام داده که از بین نمیبره برنامه هسته‌ای ایران رو و همینطور تواناییش برای بازسازی موشک‌های
I hope that
در واقع فراتر از هر توافق بره و حمایت کامل رو برای مردم
and eliminate, put intense pressure on the regime, completely eliminate their military capabilities, and ultimately the last solution is to permanently end the illegal occupation of Iran by the radical Islamists who are ruling over it. For 47 painful years, this has been an absolute disaster for the innocent people of Iran, the broader region, and the United States. In my honest opinion, Mr. Trump is fully committed to solving this issue, however long it takes to see the end of this regime. But in the current situation,
این مسئله رو حل بکنه، حالا هر چقدر که طول بکشه که پایان این رژیم رو ببینه، ولی در شرایط فعلی ایشون ادامه خواهد داد که تضعیف بکنه توانمندی هسته‌ای و جنگی اونها رو و اقتصاد رژیم رو که کنترلش دست سپاه پاسداران هست که سپاه
this regime controls nearly 40% of Iran's entire national economy, and they've aggressively taken over the most important financial and industrial sectors of the economy. I am sure many of your dedicated viewers and listeners already know this. Therefore, Mr. Trump is completely committed that ultimately the United States is looking to see the absolute end of the Islamic Republic and its deeply oppressive rule over the resilient people of Iran.
Thank you. Mark Dubowitz, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies from Washington, D.C., for joining us.
Thank you. Honored to be with you.
An exclusive Iran International report states that disagreements between the Iranian government and Mujtaba Khamenei's office prevented Iran's negotiating delegation from traveling to Islamabad last week. As the team prepared, an order was issued prohibiting engagement on nuclear issues, which Abbas Araghchi described as a death sentence for the negotiations. Meanwhile, Al Arabiya, quoting a Pakistani diplomat, reported an hour ago that while canceling negotiations between Washington and Tehran has not been discussed, talks are practically halted.
ساعتی پیش هم العربیه به نقل از یک دیپلمات پاکستانی گفته تا به حال بحثی درباره لغو مذاکرات میان واشنگتن و تهران مطرح نشده، اما گفتگوها عملاً متوقف شدند.
Ali Reza Namwar Hagigi, an experienced political analyst based in Toronto, was with us today. Mr. Namwar Hagigi, it currently seems there is an absolute ocean of dissonance between the core demands of the American and Iranian sides. Do you genuinely see a realistic possibility of reviving these critical negotiations on the horizon?
Yes, hello to you, dear Mr. Farzad, and to the viewers and listeners of Iran International Television. Well, there are, some possibilities. Not many, but there are possibilities. Part of it is related to the fact that both sides need to show more flexibility. It was that the Americans, in Mr. Trump's 15 points, had first said a complete lifting of sanctions, but then later, at the negotiating table, they said, no, we're only lifting a part of the money, meaning our sanction relief is only related to Iran's blocked money. And practically, they weren't willing to put the general lifting of sanctions on the table. And this, well, is itself perhaps the most important underlying factor of disagreement, meaning that, secondly, there is absolutely no guaranteed diplomatic path in the sense that if they were to actually give up their enriched uranium, a military attack wouldn't happen anyway. This lack of assurance is also the second major problem. And thirdly, naturally, there are also profound strategic disagreements between the US and Israel, meaning that Israel fundamentally wants to put both the nuclear issue, the ballistic missile issue, and the total change in the system's prevailing structure on the agenda, demanding a complete structural change. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump, believes he can simply agree with a specific part of the existing power structure. The nation continues to strategically present its ongoing nuclear issue not as a vulnerability, but as a primary element of its ultimate geopolitical victory. This strategic posturing is particularly impactful and highly influential due to the significant leverage and profound influence that Israel consistently exerts over foreign policy decision-making within the United States. Consequently, these intertwined factors have severely complicated the situation. On the Iranian side, naturally, exactly as you were saying earlier, there are noticeable and deep internal disagreements. Part of this relates to the fundamental core issue, which is that the government must accept that without changing its overarching strategy in the nuclear field, in the broader regional discussion, which will inevitably include the discussion of destroying Israel, and also the discussion of the diplomatic relationship with America itself, three policies that have been three fundamental policies and a constitutive pillar of the Islamic Republic since its inception, without significantly changing its strategy, neither economically nor militarily, nor in terms of its long-term outlook. It has no viable horizon for its continuation to lead to any sort of definitive victory. It can only lose the country's precious resources, and I think they themselves realize this fact.
But Mr. Nomor Hakiki, right now, if you change the channel to the Islamic Republic's news network, it's completely in another paradigm. It seems the atmosphere is that they are the winners. They have the upper hand. I understand some of it is, after all, war rhetoric, but it seems...
Well, they relate everything to this specific strategy. Look, the primary factors they are counting on are that Mr. Trump simply doesn't have much time or political capital to continue a prolonged war. Secondly, they consider the critical factor of global oil and energy prices, alongside the broader stock market, which are highly vulnerable through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is indeed under a severe siege, but its national resilience is significantly greater than America's tolerance for disruption. Consequently, turbulent markets will put immense pressure on Mr. Trump, especially given the immediate impact it has on the upcoming US elections. And thirdly, they firmly believe that any other attacks are ultimately just on physical infrastructure. They feel confident they can handle that damage, and continuing the prolonged battle will also be problematic for America unless it resorts to unconventional methods. So now, they strategically think time is on their side, while Mr. Trump also confidently thinks time is on Mr. Trump's side in this standoff. It is a complex calculation both sides are currently making. But anyway, the main overarching point is that I think the new government has finally realized that they need to fundamentally change those three core principles. That's for sure. The very fact that they held such comprehensive negotiations and that Mr. Ghalibaf met Mr. Vance directly and face-to-face clearly shows a notable change in diplomatic strategy. Most importantly, regarding the critical issue of nuclear enrichment, Iran has almost come to terms with a proposed suspension period of between 10 to 15 years. Regarding the physical removal of enriched uranium stockpiles, there's also ongoing discussion about its specific timing. For example, concerning in what order it should be transferred and where it should be relocated, there is still significant disagreement. But in principle, it can almost be said that in the new era, we will not have enrichment, meaning the enrichment industry, for practically 10 to 15 years, and that the processed uranium will be completely transferred. This is a remarkably big change. Even this concession, if Mr. Trump gets it, is a clear victory for him. And regarding the reach, as I said, they have accepted the fundamental principle of cessation of all hostilities. They just disagree on the finer details. So it is absolutely possible. It heavily depends on the approach. Well, as I said, Mr. Trump's systems sometimes involve deploying a lot of intense propaganda while foreign negotiations. He frequently boasts about how the other opponent lost and he already won. This strategy has a big impact, especially since in Iran, they give a lot of crucial importance to public propaganda. The second major point is that his descent to negotiation model involves suddenly raising the perceived price of his own goods while drastically lowering the price of the other side's goods. This approach can also be problematic, which it was regarding sanctions. But now, experience has shown both sides that sometimes Iran might bow down, and Mr. Trump might bow down too. The possibility of an agreement isn't zero, but well, day by day, with the increase in conflicts, its chances are decreasing. But both America and Iran, in my opinion, don't have a desire to continue the war. They need to find a point where they can exit honorably, and finding that point has become difficult now.
Thank you, Ali Reza Namar Hagi, political analyst from Toronto, for being with us. Just over an hour ago in Berlin, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi delivered a powerful speech in the presence of a significant number of influential German parliament members. Simultaneously, a large crowd of passionate Iranian expatriates and activists gathered directly in front of the German parliament building to show their unwavering support for. During a press conference, Prince Reza Pahlavi emphatically stated the current devastating war involving Iran is a direct result of decades of relentless warmongering by the Islamic Republic and the continued appeasement by Western governments.
If you genuinely think you can successfully deal with this brutal regime, you are severely mistaken. If this tyrannical regime remains in power in any capacity, more devastating wars across the region are absolutely inevitable. There will never be true peace or lasting stability under their rule. Even if a slightly diluted, seemingly moderate version of this regime remains in control, the underlying oppression will persist. The brave people of Iran are resolutely demanding to start a completely new chapter in their history. They've already paid the ultimate price for this new chapter with their own blood in the streets. They will absolutely not trade their hard-won fight for freedom for this hopelessly naive fantasy and dangerous dream of yours to reach negotiations and an agreement with the regime. I ask you directly, who exactly represents those 40,000 innocent people who were killed at that negotiation table?
According to Berlin police, an individual unexpectedly sprayed a red liquid at Prince Reza Pahlavi immediately following a recent press conference. The suspect was swiftly arrested and law enforcement officers are currently interrogating him to determine a motive. According to police, this individual possessed no security clearance and had not previously drawn any police attention. In response to this shocking attack, a large number of his supporters strongly criticized the performance of the security team, urgently calling for significantly greater security measures to ensure his safety. Farun Kanani, a dedicated sociology researcher based in Berlin, is joining us today. Ms. Kanani will address the broader political stances shortly, but first and foremost, let's address this alarming incident involving the throwing of a red liquid at Prince Reza Pahlavi. The troubling images that have been released clearly suggest that the assailant was able to get surprisingly close. Now, in this specific case, fortunately, nothing physically dangerous seemed to be in their hand. How much does this glaring breach indicate the severe inadequacy of his security personnel?
Greetings to you. For now, I sincerely think it is much better that we patiently wait to hear the official security team's detailed explanations. We need to see what specific explanation they actually have for this concerning situation that has suddenly arisen. Until that official information is released, I too strongly prefer, like many other reasonable observers, to refrain from engaging in any kind of baseless speculation. But there is just one very important point that I genuinely think we need to carefully address right here, and that is to closely examine and compare the level of protection that the German government, the federal government of Germany, consistently provides for someone whom the people of Iran, a massive and vocal segment of the population, are shouting his name as their legitimate representative. And compare that with, for example, those who are the murderers of Iran's children, whose names are tied to crimes against humanity. That, for example, a committee like the fact-finding committee at the United Nations officially declares in its blacklist. And when they come here to Germany for different matters, for example, for medical treatment in private hospitals, and we have the protests of the victims or the victims' families, they are escorted out back doors with police force. I think Germany has shown its stance regarding the Iranian people's ongoing demand for fundamental justice, quite implicitly, and as they say, passively, but undeniably effectively. And this, I strongly believe, is perhaps our most important task right now, to ask exactly what their subtle diplomatic signals truly mean for the future. Anyway, the official invitation to the prince was deliberately extended by some key political parties and a number of prominent representatives. Naturally, they also know that a city like Berlin is considered a very important, perhaps crucial turning point politically for Europe. In Iran's history, many rightly believe that what truly brought Iran to its knees was that singular arrow shot during the famous pre-revolution demonstration against the Shah and Shahbanu in Berlin. Perhaps it truly originated and rose from there and was, in a way, Iran's ultimate political turning point. Now that a city is once again in such a situation with such a historical background, how could they not come to the idea that, in fact, it is really possible? This is especially true since it had even been discussed that they want to hold widespread protests. They want to, in fact,
Well, unfortunately, it appears our live connection with Farouk Kanani was suddenly cut off. Let us see if we can quickly reconnect with Ms. Kanani. Ms. Kanani, it seems our connection with you has been successfully reestablished. We lost you there for just a brief moment. Can you hear my voice, Ms. Kanani?
I can clearly hear your voice now. I am sorry. I think I lost your voice for a brief moment.
Yes, as I was just saying to you, it unfortunately seems like you might have missed the last 20 to 30 seconds.
Alas, anyway, it seems it wasn't taken seriously enough by the authorities. But anyway, the occurrence of this disturbing phenomenon wasn't entirely unpredictable. It is clear that some people, anyway, are trying, under whatever kind of propaganda, or even with the support of the Islamic Republic, through the insidious infiltration of affiliated, like-minded, or even aligned and sympathetic forces, to perhaps carry out a targeted assassination attempt. I deeply think this is a direct negligence and a severe responsibility that, in fact, we must hold, anyway, the German government and those who invited them to these, anyway, meetings accountable for. This way, I really think it was a great disrespect to the Iranian nation that the brutal killers are freely moving around here under full security protection. They invest the internet for the people of Iran is cut off in this very country, and, well, someone who, anyway, is invited for political meetings as a representative of the opposition. The opposition, one of the most important representatives, and now such an assassination attempt is made on his life. Now, however this assassination attempt was, serious or not, it could have been serious. The distance was so close that, God forbid, it could have been a knife or something more terrible. And, well, it could have actually led to an irreparable disaster. Anyway, I think this is a fundamental and significant point for political forces to condemn. Regardless of your orientation, such behaviors must be condemned. Just as if it happened to other forces, Mr. Prince Reza Pahlavi himself condemned it and took a stand. The standard of justice and accountability must remain completely consistent. It should be exactly the same for him as it is for everyone else. Such egregious actions must be strongly and unequivocally condemned by all observers. Ultimately, these latent double standards and unjust behaviors are absolutely unacceptable, entirely intolerable, and deeply rejected by the proud people of Iran.
Ms. Kanani, let us shift our focus and get to the broader political topic. It certainly seems that Prince Reza Pahlavi is increasingly clashing with prominent European leaders. He previously posted a public statement heavily criticizing Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, and now he has directly criticized the German Chancellor for his continued diplomatic approach toward the Islamic Republic. In response, Mr. Moses spokesperson stated that the German government sees absolutely no reason to negotiate with him, meaning the prince, emphasizing that the established Iranian regime currently remains their official point of contact. Considering this escalating level of confrontation that has arisen with major European parties, do you think it will ultimately help him politically by rallying his base, or will it make his ongoing advocacy job significantly more difficult in the future?
Look, the stance must be correct. There's something in politics. Well, there's a term we hear a lot these days. They call it politically correct. Meaning, is it politically correct or not? Meaning, are you playing diplomatically or not? You can play diplomatically up to a certain point. Anyway, look at a famous historical example. It goes back to when, for example, those major historical events happened concerning Reza Shah. But, well, if the late Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah, really wanted to confront those who, anyway, created that difficult memory with his father, such as with England, with the United States, and so on, he would have actually had to completely close Iran's doors to all major countries, isolating the nation. But you see, he, as they say, always maintained diplomacy and tried to, in fact, prioritize Iran's path of economic development and progress through continued cooperation with these countries, instead of falling into a bitter family vendetta with them. Now, how this strategy progressed and how much of it was correct, and how much of it, if we look back today, we can see was right or wrong, that's another discussion entirely. But regarding the current situation, look, here it's simply a matter of core principle, Mr. Farsavi, meaning from a certain point onwards, being politically correct genuinely has no meaning anymore. The issue with Europe and our issue with Europe is that it has double standards, meaning this very Europe that talks about human rights closes its eyes when it comes to Iran. This very Europe, where in this very Berlin, there's a Holocaust memorial, and you can go and sit in silence among those stones that are laid out, and in fact, rightly, of course, commemorate the Holocaust. Right here, they comes and denies the crime of the Islamic Republic that happened 45, 50, 60 days ago, and happened 100 days ago. They look us in the eye amidst the internet suppression and information suppression. They tell us we don't have evidence that 50, 60,000, 40,000, 30,000 people were killed. They deny us our suffering, the blood of our people. This conveys one concept to me. It's as if human rights, it's as if for the Middle East, rights, it's as if they're no longer human. It's as if it doesn't matter to that. And someone needs to tell them this to their face, Mr. Farahzad. Someone needs to tell them that we don't accept that you claim to be, but you constantly shake hands with a regime that kills people and also threatens you in the name of that regime being official. Well, the Nazis were also the official government of Germany at one point. Is it good for us to say, to come and tell you we like them, we recognize them because a part of your culture was, for, I don't know, at least a decade, Nazi at one point? You know, here, this confrontation is truly meant to awaken the West, and most importantly, to stand in the right place in history. As I said, here, it's about core principle. It's about justice, and it's about absolute truth. I feel like the West doesn't realize at all that with these glaring double standards, it's actually deeply insulting us. Well, when we tell them earnestly that it's not just blah, 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 they simply don't believe it.
Ms. Kanani, isn't part of it because Europe, specifically the West you're talking about, well, Europe specifically doesn't have much capacity? Because it's not like the Islamic Republic is very happy with the Europeans right now either. We know they are also complaining, the United States is also dissatisfied, the protesters are also dissatisfied, meaning they have succeeded in keeping all parties dissatisfied simultaneously. Isn't a significant part of this situation due to Europe's ongoing military and financial limitations? They currently face numerous pressing internal challenges and truly do not have the necessary strategic bandwidth to actively get involved in a complex regional issue like the Middle East and especially Iran.
Why didn't they have this issue regarding Ukraine? Why did they spend millions and millions of dollars on Ukraine?
That place is right in their neighborhood.
Well, exactly. So the human rights discussion is a story. The discussion of interests comes up. Regarding the Islamic Republic too, bless you, you said it right. Regarding the Islamic Republic too, interests. Well, just 2 days ago, I saw in your news, two English banks are now under investigation and inspection for money laundering for the Islamic Republic. It's clear that there are like a bunch more and way more complicated economic dealings with the Islamic Republic than you and I think. From this phenomenon of missile towns, where Spanish companies got involved, right in the middle of the Islamic Republic sanctions, to not believing that Iran can become a democratic country. For me, there's only one answer. Europe doesn't consider a Middle Eastern citizen, at least and especially now in this case, an Iranian citizen, to even be capable of bringing themselves to democracy. For them, it seems like democracy is like summarized in long hair and blue eyes. This is the same irony I remember that the late Mohammad Reza Shah used to direct them in different interviews too. That they constantly look at the issue from a higher position. And to be honest, at some point you think about it and it dawns on you and you realize, no, it seems like human rights are really just a plaything for them. It's a selective arrangement where human rights should be observed and where they see us intertwined with suffering, maybe because our suffering better highlights the brilliance of the West. I mean, there has to be a difference, and it seems like that's not too bad for them either. If I tell you something else, by the way, the West fundamentally, especially Germany, is conservative. Although it's rich, contrary to what you might think, Germany is a very rich country. It has the right to prioritize its domestic interests. However, the idea that this war is not our war, this sentence that was actually heard in England, France, and also in Germany, an idea that is, like idiomatically, a politician says who only sees as far as the tip of their nose. If this war leads to the Islamic Republic staying, oh, then it is your war. It will be your war. And then we Iranians can sit back and say, as English speakers often say, I told you so. We had explicitly warned you about this. It is not that we enjoy seeing someone get hurt or suffer somewhere, but we know this outcome is the inevitable result of a grave diplomatic mistake. Really, there is no remedy for what one has done to oneself. We told them this tragic war would ultimately reach their land. Make no mistake, this is a deeply jihadi government. This is a regime that harbors the radical idea of expanding its influence far more than you might think. Wherever it can, it demonstrates a profound hatred towards you for your core democratic values and human rights ideas. Consequently, it actively inflicts the strategic damage it feels feels it needs to inflict on you. Unless you recognize this relentless heuristic policy that the Islamic Republic is actually playing with the West, you will remain vulnerable. You must gain the decisive upper hand somewhere. This was the West's vital chance to finally gain that essential upper hand. However, just to get some revenge on someone like Trump and these economic disputes they've had with him over the past year and a half, and to actually say, okay, now the winning card is in our hand. Now we're not on your team anymore, in compensation for you wanting to impose tariffs on our goods. They actually shot themselves in the foot in this regard. The West thinks the moment the game ends, it can step in, but it doesn't know that this game doesn't end like that. The game doesn't end with a clearly separate winner and loser at the last moment. For it to now come and sit and look with its same permanent classic conservative method and say, aha, now this is a party that is definitely pure white and a winner, so now I'll go stand on that side. The Islamic Republic plays much more complicated than this. We, at least, are seeing this clear as day, and probably this game won't end for Europe as well as it ought it would.
Thank you. Farouk Kanani, an insightful sociology researcher based in Berlin, was with us. This is a breaking news story. We have urgent breaking news coming in right now. Reports from just an hour ago indicate a continuous anti-aircraft fire has been clearly heard by residents in multiple areas, specifically including central and eastern Tehran. Domestic media outlets have also officially reported the activation of defense systems in various parts of the capital. At the same time, according to preliminary but unconfirmed reports, several unidentified drones were observed flying at a low altitude over Tehran's sky. Last night, very similar reports detailing loud explosion sounds and sudden anti-aircraft activation in Tehran were also widely published on social media. Regarding the air defenses, we still cannot speak with absolute certainty regarding the drones. However, local eyewitnesses definitively heard the sound of the air defense activation. Speaking to Fox News, Republican Senator Ted Cruz stated that America must adopt a significantly tougher approach toward the Islamic Republic. Cruz emphasized that current U.S. policy should be accompanied by far more decisive political actions. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo, Trump's former Secretary of State, echoed this sentiment during an interview with Marzia Hosseini, a correspondent in Congress. Pompeo confidently considered the ultimate fall of the Islamic Republic to be completely inevitable if the strict economic and diplomatic siege continues. Marzia Hosseini herself, our correspondent, has joined us from Congress. Tell us more, Marzia, about what Pompeo told you.
While this was actually quite an insightful working lunch, there were just a few of us reporters sitting with Trump's former Secretary of State. A good part of our discussion was swiftly off a record, which, well, I certainly won't mention here. But what Mr. Pompeo had no problem with being publicized was a striking admission. He openly said, when I was Mr. Trump's Secretary of State around 2020, I told Trump back then, let's attack and get rid of this evil of the Islamic Republic. Ultimately, however, Trump simply didn't listen. He said, actually, just recently I went to the UAE and told the Emiratis. I said, if Trump had listened to me back then, these Shahid missiles wouldn't be on your soil now. Why? Because there wouldn't even be any Shahids at all. He said, we didn't stop it back then, and now we've reached this point. And if we don't stop it now, the Islamic Republic will later turn us into North Korea. He said, if the price of oil, the price of gas is high, which in my opinion, he said, it's not really that high at all. The price of gas Americans are paying today compared to the 70s and 80s is not much. He said, even if it is high, this is a cost America has to pay so that our children are involved with the Islamic Republic. The second point he made was regarding the siege. He said, in my opinion, his view is important because Mr. Pompeo, Trump's former Secretary of State, is actually said to be the architect of maximum pressure, meaning he knows the ins and outs of Iran's economy very well. He said, in my opinion, if this siege continues, the Islamic Republic will be finished through the siege. He said, I'm not saying 6 days, 6 months, I don't know how long, but this will be very costly for the Islamic Republic. And for a large part of the lunch, he criticized the Europeans, the media, and us reporters, asking why we're not really reflecting this war as it is, although his audience was mostly American journalists. But in the end, I asked him a question. I said, as someone personally affected by this war, I consider it the worst option for the people of Iran. What exactly is the absolute worst option for America if it were to somehow lose this war? His definitive answer was that the incredibly bad option for both America and the oppressed people of Iran in the current time frame is entirely shared, and that is a current regime remaining in power. Moving on from my insightful conversation with Mr. Pompeo, the second person I spoke with today here in Washington was Senator Ben Ray Lujan, representing the Democratic Party. Now that, well, there is essentially a bit of a ceasefire and no active war happening, I finally have this valuable opportunity to speak with the Democrats about their positions. And I'm wondering, I'm asking them, you who are now trying so hard to end this war, you've repeatedly tried to pass a resolution for the 5th time. Do you also have a plan for the people of Iran? I said the internet is cut off now. It's in 2 months. You know that, well, with a massacre that has happened, you Americans, for the sake of democracy, well, you also had a 20-year war in Afghanistan. Do you fundamentally have any options in mind regarding democracy in Iran or not? Let's hear his answer.
There is support for the Iranian people.
There is support for the people of Iran, too, but what exactly President Trump is doing here, only he can answer. Also, there have been questions raised by Secretary of State Rube and the Secretary of War that, contradict what President Trump has said. All of this, goes back to the actions Prime Minister Netanyahu has taken. In the U.S., too, there are questions being raised about why, President Trump brought Prime Minister Netanyahu to the Situation Room in Washington, D.C. Overall, there are, a lot of questions about this president and the decisions he makes.
The decisions that he makes.
And the last thing I'll mention is the resolution that failed for the 5th time here in the U.S. Congress because Republicans, didn't support ending this war, even though Democrats are planning to bring this resolution to the public stage again.
Thank you so much, Marzia Hosseini, my dedicated colleague serving there in the U.S. Congress. Ukraine's president has officially announced that his country has signed a strategic drone agreement with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, the primary goal of this international partnership is to collaboratively produce advanced drones and sophisticated defense systems at a significantly lower cost. Zelensky stated that the Islamic Republic's attack drones are currently manufactured at a high cost, ranging between $80,000 and $130,000. But now they are expected to be effectively destroyed by efficient interception, costing only around $10,000. Zelensky strongly emphasized that his crucial cooperation aims to substantially strengthen the defensive capabilities and security of the Persian Gulf countries. Meanwhile, European leaders gathered in the Mediterranean nation of Cyprus just a few hours ago for a crucial regional meeting. During this summit, they are widely expected to extensively discuss the ongoing consequences of the war with the Islamic Republic, alongside Tehran's escalating military threats. Niloufar Pour-Ibrahim is joining us live from Paris. Niloufar, the rapidly evolving situation in the region and the complex challenges it has created for Europe have, as you know, caused the review of the EU's main internal issues to be postponed. It seems Europe has no choice but to urgently confront these new crises. Please tell us more about the specifics of their critical meeting taking place there in Cyprus.
Yeah, exactly. European countries usually in these leaders' meetings, whether they're formal or informal summits, they come together to discuss and make critical long-term decisions on a number of main global issues. But right now, the current situation is such that they're increasingly forced to keep postponing certain decisions or discussions on topics that are actually really important to their future. For example, the complex budget discussion, policies related to China, the ongoing expansion of the European Union, and the pressing migrant crisis. And now a very similar thing has happened once again. And because of the sudden new priorities that have, unexpectedly emerged for them with these complicated new crises, they've had to quickly add several pressing new topics to their meeting agenda. This crucially includes the severe security threats and compounding economic challenges that this devastating war in the Middle East has now created for them. Ultimately, in the incredibly complex current situation, they are clearly seeing and once again facing the harsh fact that they simply can't play a decisive role in shaping the outcome of the conflict. So they just, in a way, have to navigate and get through these overlapping crises and just keep their heads above water, desperately trying not to drown in the overwhelming and unpredictable current circumstances. The energy crisis is severely harming them, and there is not much they can do about it. Therefore, they must currently prioritize security, energy, and financial discussions. For example, they want to discuss an aid package for low-income groups in the European Union. Furthermore, regarding previous crises, they will likely have to decide on postponing the repayment of debts, like their COVID debts, which were supposed to start being repaid in 2028. Regarding the previous crises they somehow managed to effectively deal with, they now probably have to make a tough decision on postponing the repayment of their mounting debts. This includes things like the massive COVID relief debts, which they were originally supposed to start repaying from 2028, given the strain of our current economic circumstances. There are so many complex topics they urgently need to discuss today. They have a tremendous amount of work to do, which they probably won't be able to reach any meaningful consensus on. Right now, they're genuinely happy that they can finally reach a solid conclusion regarding Ukraine, considering that with Viktor Orban's recent departure, the major roadblock is gone, which means they can now actually decide on that crucial €90 million loan they were supposed to give to Ukraine, finally grant this much-needed money, or, effectively implement some of the tough economic sanctions they wanted to impose against Russia. But honestly, on other pressing issues, there are still, many complex problems standing in their way. For example, Cyprus has recently, requested that they discuss a broader European common defense strategy, or specifically a mutual defense clause that exists in this regard, and strengthen it. However, it's still highly unclear whether they can successfully take such decisive action coalition or not. So far, this particular clause hasn't really been used in practice. It is supposed to work like NATO, where if a member country of the European Union is attacked, a collective defense would be carried out. It's also completely unclear if it can actually make a firm decision on it. Or, regarding this ongoing discussion about the Strait of Hormuz coalition, which most European countries have also joined, it is still very unclear, for example, what they truly want to do about its daily management and operations. France believes that they should have more independence regarding their overall national defense and remain somewhat separate from broader European military strategies. But countries like Germany and Italy believe that they should, in a way, still continue these close cooperations, or even actively seek security help from the United States. So there are still many deep disagreements on the main issues dividing them today. Because of this, many observers believe that they probably won't be able to get a big outcome from this summit either, especially since it's just an informal summit too, But we already know that tomorrow, for example, right around noon, several prominent regional leaders are going to join them for a collaborative working lunch to have more in-depth discussions regarding pressing regional issues and shared policy goals.
Thank you, Neela Farpour Eberheim, our dedicated correspondent in Paris, for being with us and sharing your insights. And a special thank you to our viewers for watching tonight's 24 program. You can also watch this broadcast again a little later on Iran International's YouTube channel.